Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining the Golf Heritage Society Grand Zoom series. We are very delighted to have Roger McStravick. I'm going to talk a little bit about Roger in a second, but co-hosting with me is our own Pete Georgity. Pete Georgity is one of our renowned authors as well, and a Hall of Famer. I'd like to say just a second about the Grand Zoom series. It's now a year old, and it came about because of the difficulties in communicating and getting together during COVID. So we decided to have meetings on Zoom, and then we found out how well we could be connected with each other, and we started to understand how many people we knew and that we were connected with people who do great things in the game of golf. So we started to ask them if they would participate in a Zoom call with us and share what they have done and what they're currently working on. So it's a very exciting thing. It's a very strong membership benefit, and I'm very pleased for us to offer this both in general and especially today. Pete Georgity, would you like to say hi to Roger McStravick and tell us a little bit about his background?
Roger and I had an interesting first meeting. I was doing my book on Tom Morris golf clubs, and Peter Crabtree told me that I needed to talk to Roger because he had a great photograph of the first shop from Tom Morris's first shop. So I contacted Roger. Roger was very accommodating, got me that photograph, and he also sent me a PDF of his book, St. Andrews in the Footsteps of Old Tom Morris. And so I started reading that, and I read it word for word assiduously. And then I got to page 171, and Roger had quoted me. I was absolutely gobsmacked. From that moment on, of course, we've been very, very good friends. First thing you need to know about Roger is that he is the one and only person to win the Herbert Warren Wind Award from the USGA for outstanding book publishing twice. No one else has won it twice. Award's not been out that long, but I think that in the annals of that award, there are going to be very, very, very few people that win it multiple times. So that is the feather in Roger's cap. I want to know more about Roger. We've spent a lot of time together, and he's still a mystery to me. So hopefully this meeting will elucidate some of that. But he is also the editor of the BGCS magazine Through the Green, which most of us get, and which he is doing an excellent job at. And as young as he is, he'll probably be doing that 50 years from now. So jump onto that. If you're not a member, please join. He's an outstanding researcher. He is a resident of the town, and he is a bon vivant, as Byrne can attest, because when we were there a couple of years ago, he took Byrne and Rossi out on the town, and they didn't get back in till 3 a.m. And the sad part about that is that Byrne had the room key, and Brad Baird had to sleep in a comfy chair in the hallway until they got back. So that was great. But he was a great host while we were there. I don't know what else I can say about Roger, except that he's an exceptional writer, exceptional historian, exceptional researcher, and he's just plain nice guy to get along with.
Fantastic. Well, Pete, thank you for that. We want to hear from Roger. Roger's website is simply rogermcstravick.com, and his books are found at findgolfbooks.com. And on the face, you'll see golf, history, writer. So that leads us to invite Roger to speak with us to say, Roger, tell us how you got involved in golf and in history and in writing, please.
Thanks. First of all, it's lovely to be here. It does feel an honor to be asked to speak to you all. So thank you very much. Writing, it just was something that at school and at work that I kind of was happy in. I remember being 13 and being pulled out by Mr. Flanagan because I'd written a poem. And he gave me lots of praise, which was lovely. And then obviously I got bullied by the rest of the class because, I'd got some praise, it was the Northern Irish upbringing, but then, when I started work, it was always the writing part that I absolutely loved. At Visit Scotland, I was in charge of their golf PR. So I was a ghostwriter for Sam Torrance, and I loved that, and I had to write articles within that job for golf magazines, and I loved that, So it was always the writing part that I loved, and I seemed to be at my happiest, and it's going to sound awful, but if I'm at home and writing and I've got classic FM just playing in the background, then I am so content, and if I don't, the opposite, if I don't get, I'm a wee bit irritable, so it's almost therapeutic for me. So yeah, it just was a thing that worked for me.
So you're something of a recluse and at home in the library. Would that be accurate?
Completely accurate. Absolutely. Yeah. The university library, in particular, the special collections department, I would camp there if they would allow me, it is so fantastic. Their archives are amazing. It's the original photographs, but also the original documents, and in St. Andrews, we hear a lot about, John White Melville or Playfair, and these are their documents and their signed documents, So the joy of St. Andrews is that lots and lots of fantastic research is available. And I've said it before, but if I spent the rest of my life studying St. Andrews, I'd probably cover about 1% of what I want to discover about St. Andrews. It is amazing, on so many different levels.
So we know that you're very, very dedicated in doing the timeline of some of your works. 15, 17, 18, and 20 are the publications. And I'm just dying to ask you, was there an overall plan for the publications, or did one naturally come from another? Little Tommy Morris and Footsteps were both published in 2015.
So if I start with Footsteps, first of all, and this is really how I got into golf history, and it really was by accident. David Joy, who plays Old Tom Morris, was doing a show at the Bar Theatre during the Open in 2010, and it was Peter Ellis interviews Old Tom Morris. But I went to see Peter Ellis because I was brought up in the 80s. Like, there's Christmas photographs on me on Christmas morning, and behind me is Skilextric and Meccano, but I'm holding the Peter Ellis video because I'm really excited about it, So, that show, I went to see Peter Ellis, and then an old man comes walking on the stage with a beard, and I go, what's this, But then David Joy is so brilliant that he starts acting, and I'm gripped, and then I get more and more into it, and it was just mesmerizing. And then when Peter Ellis came on, I didn't want Peter Ellis to come on. I wanted Old Tom to stay on, So after that, I started researching and finding out my own things and finding out new things that hadn't been written about Tom Morris, So that's how Footsteps came about. I just started reading and researching and finding new things. And lots of the new things came also by accident. I was at the university, and Katrina said, she's one of the members of staff, at the Special Collection, said, we have a box called St. Andrews Links. Nobody really knows what it is. Would you like to have a look at it? I said, yeah, of course, yeah. And I opened it up and I couldn't believe it because, first of all, it was the receipts to pay the carter to take the rubbish from St. Andrews Town, to dump it on the East Sands beach and level it off. And this was the creation of the first hole at St. Andrews. And it was much earlier. It was in the 1830s. Before that, it said it was 1846 and stuff. This was 10 years earlier, and these were the original receipts. And then also there was a load of folded documents, and I opened them, and it was statement after statement by Jamie Anderson, John White Melville, Tom Morris, all these great names in 1879, talking about the earliest memories of the links, the earliest memories of St Andrews. And it was just a treasure trove. So I literally just wanted to pull the jumper over my head at that moment. It was just because you can't make noise in the library, so I had to stifle it, but it was just a wondrous moment. And that's how Footsteps came about. And it's also how my recent book, St Andrews Road War Papers, came about, because that was originally going to be called The Road War Statements from 1879. Because I just wanted the people to be speaking themselves and try not to get in the way. So that was Footsteps. And then on Little Tommy Morris, I took about an hour to write that, because I was tired of reading My Son the Gruffalo, and I love the Gruffalo. But there's only so many times you can read the Gruffalo and variations. And I wanted something with golf in it, And so I wrote this little poem, and I sent it to Peter Crabtree, who's been a wonderful mentor to me. He's been so kind. And he came back in a flash, and he was far more vociferous about Little Tommy Morris than any history book that I've written. It was just the thing that I wrote in an hour. He was so vociferous, and he says, you have to get this, in book form. And so we did. We found a New York artist, and he was living in St Andrews, Rhea Randall, and she put the art to it, and it just worked out. So joyful, and it sold thousands in just in St Andrews alone, and I mean that just more in shock. It's such a lovely, happy book. I go in and read it to schools, and I love that. And I love at schools, you get lots of questions. The kids are, they're, 5, 6, 7 years old, and you've done it. And then the person everyone wants to ask a question. So all the hands are up. And then you just get random questions like, what's your favorite band? And which I love. So yeah. So, and if you say Pet Shop Boys, they're just lost on them. So, but anyway, so that was that book. It's just a joyful experience.
That's terrific. So my personal favorite is A History of Golf, Roger. It's 150 pages. It has pictures. It looks like a primer. It invites participation. Tell us about putting that together. And, you mentioned to me when we were together, Chick Harper as your partner and illustrator. Tell us a little bit about putting that book together and your respective roles in it.
Yeah. The book. The thing I really enjoyed about the book is that lots of the photographs have come from the legends themselves. So I spent some time with Peter Thompson and had a cup of coffee with him and Mrs. Thompson at Walden House, and I was pinching myself, this is Peter Thompson, this is one of the open greats, and so it was just lovely spending time with him, and he gave me a photograph that was one of his collection. I've been dealing with the Bobby Locke family, and there was one from them, and then one of the most personal ones was Payne Stewart's wife, and I sent her over what I was going to say about Payne, and she came back and kindly let me use one of photographs that she had, one of her collection of Payne Stewart, so it was a wonderful exercise. And talking about Chick's phenomenal. He is an artist, and we're on the same wavelength in terms of I wanted for my books for the photographs to be large. You so often you get a picture of Tom Morris, and it's like, a postage stamp. But like, no, I want full size. I want it as best resolution as possible, So the books are beautiful to look at. And Chick absolutely, he got that, but also he does a million times more of artistic stuff in books. If you see his books, they're just beautiful to look at. So he is fantastic. And I'm so glad that he won. I think it was the Murdoch Medal a couple of years ago for his contribution. Because I just love, he makes beautiful books. There's so many books that come out, and books that could be absolutely wonderful, and you think they've got an archive of wonderful photographs, and unfortunately they get slightly stifled because the photographs have been shrunk down into tiny, smaller, whereas if Chick had got it, I would know, it would be beautiful, so he is an exceptional talent, and I hope he doesn't retire. I've been asked to do the Crail book, and the first question the general manager David Royce asked me was, "When are you going to die?" Which I thought was a bit dire for an opening question, but it was because he said, "Well, our anniversary is in 15 years, so." And they wanted a chapter per year, and it was, and I think, well, I do think hopefully I'll be here in 15 years, but it's quite a clever concept, because it means every year I give them a chapter, which they have content for their website, and it also spreads the budget, over 15 years. So, so it works well.
Very good. So
yeah,
he's quite a golfer as well as you are. You guys demonstrated when we were out on the old course together. It was just one of my most memorable golf days. And our good friend Brad Bayard had a career day, and I'm sure that if he's on, he could chip in and tell us about how he played out of his mind, because he did. But it was one of the greatest days. So how did Roger McStravick get interested in the game of golf?
1970s Opens is the honest answer. I loved it. I loved the burnt fairways. I loved the ball running for miles. And I plagued my mum and dad from I was about 9 to let me get some golf clubs. And eventually, when I was 11, they allowed me to get my first set. It was a set of Lee Trevino Supermax clubs, John Letters, beautiful, beautiful clubs. And it was, 3 irons, a putter, and a 2-wood, But with that, I got down to 13 in 2 years, and then just kept coming down until, it was about 15, 16. I think my lowest would have been 4. And I'm 5.2 right now. So yeah, but it was just a passion. And then mum and dad, we moved house overlooking the golf club. So I would play golf before school, but I had to climb over the wall, and the wall was about 8 foot. It was made during the years of the famine. The poor people of Lurgan, where I'm from, built this wall in order to get fed during the famine. So I had to climb over that every morning, and invariably there was somebody on the other side of the wall. And you have to remember, this isn't the Troubles in Northern Ireland. So if you're about to tee off standing beside a wall, and somebody starts climbing over the top of it, it's kind of scary in Northern Ireland, So I give a few members heart failure, thinking their time had come, But it was just, yeah, it was a lovely, lovely place to live. It was just beautiful. Yeah, Lurgan was fantastic as well, I should say, because although there was the Troubles, at the club, golf was the religion. So therefore, I was going to say every religion, but there, at that time in Northern Ireland, there seemingly was only 2 religions. But at the golf club, it didn't matter. So from the age of 11, my best friends are from, every religion. And I've and that lovely open aspect, I kind of that sort of filtered through the rest of my life. You know, that the golf club is a fantastic place to bring up children. You know, I learned a lot about discipline and, you know, and tolerance and openness, you know. And if anybody ever tried to talk about anything controversial, like, you know, the IRA or loyalist terrorism, they would get a letter from the secretary, you know. So so it was a wonderful, wonderful place to be brought up in.
So Roger, everyone wants to know, how does a Northern Irishman come to St. Andrews? How did that happen?
So I was, you know, I was a working person then. I got a job because I went from PR at Visit Scotland to PR and marketing manager at the Fairmont Hotel. And I did that for a year and a half. And it was a real baptism of fire, because they usually have $250,000 budget for marketing. But shortly after I arrived, they had a financial problem. So I literally had a zero marketing budget. But it was such a brilliant exercise to have to learn how to do PR marketing with nothing. So it was actually really useful. So when it came to doing books and stuff like that, then you know, I was always trying to think about 3 moves ahead, you know. So so although it was traumatic at the time, you know, but looking back, it just gave me lots of skills that I've used, you know, to this day, really, you know.
You know, Roger, that's something we have in common. Roger McStravick and the Golf Heritage Society, zero budget for marketing. We do our best. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
did you ever have a job as a, you said you were a ghostwriter for Mr. Torrance?
Yeah.
Was that your first writing job?
It was part of the PR job, but I was also the editor for the government. This was Jack McConnell's, when he was the First Minister of Scotland. He wanted a modern Scotland magazine that wasn't all sort of tartan bread, you know, and tweed. So it was all about the modern fashion designers and modern Scotland. So I put that together from literally a blank page. But what I really enjoyed was being the editor, editing other people's work, but also writing the articles about modern Scotland, you know. And also I got to travel within that job. I got to travel to, it's Tartan Week then. I'm not sure if it's still called Tartan Week in New York. Yeah, no, it was fantastic. You know, it was one of the best conversations I ever had with a boss. They said they wanted me to go to New York. They were flying me first class, and they wanted me to write in the persona of Tam, the owner of a camper van. So I was writing in this character in this character all week, and they were doing updates from Tam with the camper van. And they said, but what you have to do is go to every party that week. It's just like, I'm in my 20s and just thinking, I can do this. You know, I've got this. You know,
For you.
So it was just a joy, a real joy.
So it comes to question, research or writing, which is your preference?
Brilliant question. And I absolutely love both. But I have to say writing, you know, because I can research, you know, all day long. But if I'm writing all day long, it's like I've taken a happy pill at the end of the day, you know. There's nothing can put me down, you know. So it just, because I do love it, you know. And I don't know why. My uncle Brendan, who passed away recently during COVID, and he was the headmaster of the school, and the last thing he said to me was, you were born to write. And it really struck a chord in me, because I never thought about it, you know, because he's known me all my life, you know, and I've had various jobs, you know, and studied various things, you know. My master's is in golf course architecture, but yeah, it's the one that honestly it's like 2 different people, you know. It just has that effect on me. It is therapeutic, you know.
good for you. You're blessed, I think. St. Andrews and
I'm not sure.
all the research opportunities. So,
Have you seen my writing? I'm not sure.
no, we love your writing, my friend. Yeah, yeah. If I can ask a personal question that's golf related, the history of golf, it has 14 chapters and they're so readable. I think it's brilliant to just take the whole history of golf and take 14 segments. How did you decide on the approach to that book, A History of Golf?
It came about because there's a friend of ours, David Evans, a businessman, who basically called Chick and I in a bit of a huff and said, he's been walking around the shops in St. Andrews and can't find a book on the history of golf. And it really started out, well, okay, well, let's do it, And again, the idea was to make something visual and beautiful to look at, but make it slightly unique, and these personal touches are throughout, with, Bobby Locke's family's contribution, etc. It was a joy to work on, and I met some lovely contacts. There was one man who I was in touch with recently called Alfred Pratt, which is an unfortunate surname, but it's just he's about to turn 90, and he was Bobby Locke's nephew, but in fact he was brought up by Bobby Locke's mother, and he had all these behind the scenes stories about Bobby Locke. He remembers after Bobby Locke's nearly fatal car crash, he was the one that cleaned the blood off the clubs. He was the one that went to the hospital and donated blood to help Locke stay alive. So it was amazing. He really truly brought that to life. And I wish he's in this edition of Through the Green, because he sent me an email and it was so fantastic that and we had already filled the magazine up, and there's lots of articles going into the autumn edition. And I said to him, do you mind if I just put this in correspondence? And he said, no, absolutely. Because it was just a wonderful, firsthand, authentic, behind the scenes, and, a little bit about Bobby Locke. So it was incredible. So, and that's the joy of working as the editor of Through the Green, and also the working on that book is who these characters that you meet, just amazing. And he has such a wonderful collection of Bobby Locke. So hopefully, we will be able to help him, preserve that.
Might Bobby Locke be a subject of a future writing of yours?
I'm not sure. Because he is a controversial character. Although, I'm working on Alan Robertson at the moment, and he's a controversial character. But there's a lot of things I didn't know about Alan Robertson, which I know now, and words that I hadn't heard before about Alan, such as kind, funny, because so that's really enjoyable. So we'll see. I just having spoken to Alfred, it doesn't sound like an attractive character, and if you have to write it honestly, it would have to be fairly brutal, and I really genuinely don't believe I have that in me to be that nasty about anyone, and
I think and it about you, Roger, so I better change the subject. So I'd like to know, the title St. Andrews, a comfort blanket for the hapless golfer. Tell us all about that. I mean, it just is so inviting.
So it starts with a bit of a sad story, and it was that my mum and dad passed away within a year of each other. Mum passed away. She went into the hospital, had a little operation, and caught something in the hospital, and 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 that knocked me sideways. And then my dad died, and then my father-in-law died, and then our cat died. I mean, it was just unbelievable. It was just, and I just wanted to write something happy and funny, and in the book, there's lots of family stories, things about like my dad, was a beautiful man, but he would sing at restaurants. And you would go to a Chinese restaurant with traditional Chinese music, and he would be making up words, and it was just like, Dad, what are you doing? This isn't appropriate. So I wanted to remember those happy memories, and so that's what it came out as. And also, I also feel that there's a lot of people who come to St Andrews and are quite intimidated by St Andrews. And this was a little book for them to go, listen, it's okay, don't worry about it. These are the sort of things you need to know to help you get through. So it was a fun book to write, and therapeutic as well. And it really helped me, set me up for the next book. So it was good. It sort of helped me work a lot of stuff out of my system. I do love it, and I'm chuffed that it sells.
So in a sense, it allowed you to come forward and write the Road War papers.
Yeah, no, completely. I was ready then to do something serious, something, and this goes back to what I found in that initial research at the university. It was going to be the Road War statements. But I couldn't believe it was old Tom Morris in his own voice talking about his life and talking about when he started with Alan Robertson, because that had been guessed at so far. And it turns out he was 18. He was never 14 years old, and he was never the boy apprentice. By 18 years old, Tom Morris is already one of the best, if not the best golfer in St Andrews. He already knows how to make a feathery, because he would have had to know how to repair and make a feathery, because he came from a working class family. His father worked on a hand loom weave, So it was dispelling a lot of myths that have been told about Alan Robertson. So it was just incredible. So, but the more the stories came out, and I thought, well, this is important. Then Peter Lewis in particular said to me, you have to explain why it's important, So throughout the book, there is the Road War, and the Road War was when, just to explain very quickly, the town council wanted to give permission to put a road down the side of the links, just by the 18th, because the course used to go right to the doors of the houses, and the locals wanted to build their own road, and the town council said, yes, you can do it. You'll have to do the upkeep yourself, etc. But John Patterson, who was on the town council, said, well, this is barbaric. How can you put a road through the ancient links? And then that became, he took the town council to court. And it wasn't court as in anyone could go to jail. It was to decide what the law was on that matter, whether they were allowed to do that. And it went all the way to the House of Lords, and it was a big case, and there's lots of going back and forth, So it's quite exciting because it's a courtroom drama as well. So there's that narrative going through. Before they went to trial, what they do is they do precognition statements. They take statements, see what people are going to say, So, but these statements were just a gold mine of information about the links and where things were positioned. And there was one man said, I remember George Clark, I think it was, building the first house east of the Wynd. And that was Granny Clark's Wynd, which became Granny Clark's Wynd, which goes all the way across the links, And then, so there was lots of little nuggets, the creation of the first hole, the Swilcan burn, setting the Swilcan burn in its place once and for all, because Mr. Cheap, who took over the land in around 1821, had a habit of slightly meandering the Spilkin burn to try to take a little bit more land and a little bit more land, So so yeah, so it was just I find the research wonderful, and I thought it would have made a good sort of a short book, a sort of a F5 sort of book as well. So, and I still want to bring that version out, because the courtroom drama narrative can move quite fast, and it's just really interesting to see how it goes back and forth. And eventually the town get permission to put this road in, so it's yeah, I just find it fascinating, and I loved hearing the voices of Tom Morrison, Jamie Anderson, Bob Martin, these open champions, without any sort of editing by myself. It was just Tom Morris in his own words, which was just a joy.
Good for you. Well, the obviously the book won the award. In my preparation, I'd seen Footsteps described as a masterpiece, and when I hold it in my hands, I can feel the effort, the work, the detail. What was your favorite part of writing the Footsteps? Was there a series of chapters or a part of it that is your favorite?
Footsteps is a sort of book you could pick up anywhere, and hopefully be able to find something of interest. What I really loved about Footsteps was, bizarrely, and it's not about writing, so excuse me for a second, was working with the St Andrews Preservation Trust. And they are a local charity in St Andrews, and it's done by people who are retired. Usually it's retired ladies. And I went there to see, did they have like possibly a Tom Morris photograph? And they said, oh yeah, we have lots of old photographs. And they opened this cupboard filled with boxes of photographs from the 1800s that hadn't been scanned, preserved, or anything. And it was unbelievable. So, and they were so kind, they were, take what you need, and they are phenomenal. So if anybody's doing any research on St Andrews, the St Andrews Preservation Trust is definitely worth approaching. They're getting a bit more corporate now and getting their photographs scanned, but they just have the best photographs of St Andrews links shortly after the reclamation has started, but you will get to see piles of rubble, from the sort of 1840s, 1850s, so but also that book, it was just, I loved writing about and researching just every character in St Andrews. And the one that struck a chord with me was Jamie Anderson, because Jamie Anderson was always accused or written about as an alcoholic, and I did some investigation of, because he went to a poorhouse, and I did some investigation, some research into that, and I spoke to an expert on poorhouses, and he said, no, it's not that, like Charles Dickens would have said. People put themselves into the poorhouse to give their family some respite. So, because the narrative is being, he was an alcoholic, went to a poorhouse, died in a poorhouse, was in a grave with no headstone. So I wanted not to completely correct the story, but just say there's nothing other than one arrest. He had one arrest because he was drunk and incapable, I think the charge was. But beyond that, there's nothing, and there's and with most people there is, and there'd be lots of, he's in court for this, or but there's almost nothing. And then, but the fact that Jimmy had no headstone, it just kept coming back to me, and it kept bothering me. This is a 3 times open champion, first to win it on 3 different courses, which is something, Tommy didn't have the chance to do it, but he did have the chance to win it in St Andrews in 1873. But he was just a phenomenal golfer, and to have him with no headstone, and people were just walking over his grave, not realizing it, it was just heartbreaking. So it just kept coming back to me, and then to write all right, I have to do something about this. And I started the long process. And to cut a long story short, the RNA were amazing, very helpful, as were some of the other charities in town. I'm a trustee at the St Andrews Pilgrim Foundation, who work to preserve the old architecture, and they helped as well, with the budget for it. And then, so the one final thing, sorry, I don't know if I'm rambling, but the one final thing was that on the day, I wanted an open champion there. I wanted a champion golfer there. And because all the others, when Alan Robertson had died, there was a big funeral. When Tommy and Tom Morris died, huge funerals. When Jamie Anderson died, there was nothing. In the paper, it said, this is an intimation, not an invitation, i.e., this is the news, don't come to the funeral. I just deserve better. So I wanted a champion to be there. And the RNA lined up Sandy Lyle, which was just brilliant. And he spoke so well. He had a big speech prepared, and he'd rehearsed it because he's quite nervous about public speaking. And then on the day, it was just a beautiful sunny day, and he just ad-libbed. He put it in his pocket, and it was just from the heart. It was just brilliant. So yeah, sorry, I've meandered there a bit, but yeah, it was a special day.
Yeah, so Roger, when we started the conversation, we sort of patted ourselves on the back a little to say that the Zoom gives us the opportunity to reach out to friends and members who've accomplished great things and become intimate and engage with them. Well, you just did that, my friend. You told us about Roger McStravick and who he is as a person, relating to people in history who really should be respected and put in proper light. So thank you very much for that. We appreciate it. Roger, I'm going to do a commercial on you. I'm going to say to people that you have to go to rogermcstravick.com and see a lot of and be invited to all the wonderful works that Roger has produced. And you can find them on finegolfbooks.com. And you want to do that too, because you don't want Roger McStravick to go to the poorhouse, do you? So we want him to sell books.
I put myself in.
and we want him to come to the US of A for our next convention.
So that would be fantastic.
I think what we have a tradition of doing is collecting questions that may come up along the way. So I don't know if there are any questions. I'm going to reach over to George and see if he has any questions for Roger that have come in.
Thank you. I haven't seen any on the chat, so anybody wants to touch the chat button. I do know that Bob Geddes signaled to me that he had a question, and so he's online. Why don't you go ahead, Bob?
Thank you, George, and thanks, Roger, for the time today to share your thoughts on St. Andrews and your experience and career. We had an opportunity back in 2004 to visit St. Andrews as a family, and we were hosted by a family with Alan Ferguson. And Alan recently shared with me a note about the upcoming Open, but he also mentioned the town match at St. Andrews. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the town match, absolutely. It is, bar Christmas Day, the best day of the year in St. Andrews. So to explain it, it's the town versus the RNA. So for that one day, it's open door policy between the RNA, the St. Andrews Golf Club, the New Golf Club, and the ladies clubs as well. And it's fantastic. So a typical day would start with, I tried to meet the group before we play a match, and we'd go for a dram beforehand, and then, or maybe two, and then we go and play the match, and the match is played in really good humor. And then afterwards you go back to the RNA and have lunch, and then you go to the St. Andrews Club, and then you go to the new club, and then you go back to the RNA, taking slightly longer to walk to the RNA than it did to leave the RNA. And then you in theory, you do this route all day. And most people have to ask for a license from their family to be away for all day, but it is great fun. I absolutely love it. and it's just in the great spirit. And honestly, it doesn't matter what the result is in your match. And then about 7 o'clock at night, everyone gathers by the 18th green, and the speakers are put out, and the RNA secretary will announce the results. And it is really close. The town won it last year, but the 2 years before that, the RNA won it. So it is really great fun, and it's played in the best of spirits, you know. I usually arrange a light day for the day after.
Hey, this is James Kaiser. I have a quick question. If you have a moment, do you know anything about Tom Morrison when he was a kid and him playing silly bodkins, which we used old champagne cork with nails in it, played through the streets of St. Andrews? And are they still doing any form of that today with the kids through the streets of St. Andrews? Have you heard anything about that?
So the only place I've read that is in Kevin Cook's book, and Tommy's Honor. But street golf, there was a little of that played a few years ago, but it was a really common game and popular game to be played around churches. You'd play around the church and back to the church door. But I think that the working class, especially, the feathery ball was expensive, so they would play with anything. So you can imagine, logically, they would try to make a golf ball out of anything like a cork and nails. But I haven't actually seen anything written, apart from in Kevin's book, about that. But I do love the idea of street golf. And then we did the St. Andrews Festival in 2012, and we played some street golf, and we had special clubs by a company called the 19th Hole. They're based in Paris, and they do street golf, but sort of MTV style. It's all sort of heavy music, and and they're pitching to the bottom of the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower, one of the legs of it is a pin. So we did a little of that, and we pitched this special ball. It's really light, so it would hit a car, but bounce off it. But it did that into the George White Melville fountain, and we got a lot of frowns for doing that. But it just for the poor people in St. Andrews back in the day, just golf was a game they would love to play, and so anything they could do to be able to put a ball and a club together, and it's really important in that, when in Scotland, it was a game for everybody. That's the spirit of St. Andrews, golf for all, and you think of all those early heroes, they're all working class. But it's only when it started, going down to England, etc., and being played on landed gentry estates that it became an elite game. And even in Ireland, it was seen as an elite game when we won a school competition. Sister St. Anne, our school was run by nuns, and the nuns would frighten the devil. They were terrifying. So basically, so we had to go through this charade, this awful thing where she would present the trophy to us the day after the competition. And we were dreading it, because we had to stand up in front of the assembly hall, and all the people are booing as we were going, because we're the posh boys, and we're not posh, because we're going to pick up the club, pick up the trophy that Sister St. Anne's presenting us to it, because everybody, they love the Gaelic players. If the Gaelic players, they got a draw at football, they've been heralded like the second coming. But no, the golfers were always given a hard time because it's perceived as an elite sport. But here in St. Andrews, it's not. My son gets, they give him golf history lessons as one of their project. All the kids are, invited to come down the links. The Links Trust do fantastic things for junior golf. So St. Andrews, never an elite sport.
You're also known as a consultant, both on golf and on golf history. There are a lot of things going on, of course, other authors, but also filmmakers. Can you tell us a little bit about some of that activity?
Yeah, I was asked to come in on the Tommy's Honor movie, and I read the script, and I really didn't feel, I feel it needed a complete rewrite, so I couldn't help there. And there's various projects. We're looking at the moment on a movie for Tom Morris, and what the producers in America are interested in is Tom Morris, the golf course architect, Supremo. That's what they see it as, sort of a man on a mission, this higher calling to create these beautiful courses. The one line that stuck in me, they said, who cares what score Picasso scored on a golf course? So we're talking about that at the minute and trying to see what storyline we can get. I just don't want to get it become too far removed from Tom Morris. And because the Tommy's Honor movie, the thing that the really hard part I found was in the movie, and I don't know if you've seen it, the bit where Tommy's wife is in trouble, in labor, and a telegraph comes and Tom puts it in his pocket because he's having a good day on the golf course. But the true story is that Tom and Tommy won the match against Mungo Park and Willie Park. And as they're being congratulated, etc., the telegraph comes and tells Tommy to get home because his wife's in danger. They were going to go by train. Someone locally said that get them across on a boat. It took a little while for it to get there. So as they were on the boat, and the boat is just pulling away, and another telegraph comes to say Tommy's wife is dead and child stillborn. So as they crossed, from North Berwick back to St Andrews, they did not know how if the wife was alive or dead. And then Tommy ran down North Street, and Reverend Boyd was on the door, and he said, "I'm so sorry for your loss." And Tommy said, "It's not true, it's not true," and ran past him, and she was dead, and the child stillborn, which I find more dramatic than Tom's having a good day and he buries and hides these telegrams. I find that more poignant. And then Tommy himself, his death, he dies, goes to bed on Christmas Eve after saying goodnight to Tom, and because by now he's moved back with his parents, and says goodnight to them on Christmas Eve. And then Christmas morning doesn't rise, and then Tom goes to get him and he is dead. He's died of a burst aneurysm in his left lung. And I find that far more poignant than the storyline that they created themselves. And that's the problem with movies, is that they're trying to up the drama, but I find the stories, in this case, more dramatic.
Roger, do you think old Tom was a player, a club builder, an architect? What was his predominant interest as you know him?
So Tom was a ball maker. He was never a club maker. He got clubs, but he stamped them. But he was the best player in the world. We see these old photographs of him in black and white, and I kind of like to think of Tom, in his earlier years, when he's winning the Open Championship, and in his sort of early 40s. So he was the best player in the world. But then he goes on to design or redesign over 100 courses. So his influence was phenomenal, and he was known as the grand old man of golf because he did touch every element of golf. He was a caddy as a boy, and later in life, he tried to improve the standards for caddies and try to get them in education. And and every element of golf he's touching, whether it's professionalism or whether it's course maintenance, whether it's, top dressing on golf courses created by Tom Morris. He says tin cups, but I'm sure the jury's out on that. I think Musselburgh may have an earlier claim, but Tom Morris thought he invented tin cups. Excuse me. So I think Tom was rightly known as the grand old man of golf because he had so much knowledge, and he could talk freely and mingle freely with Prince Leopold, Queen Victoria's son, as much as the caddy boy with no shoes, because the caddy boy saw him as one of their own who had done well, and Tom Morris, when he died, he had the equivalent of £2 million in his bank account, but that was largely due to his son-in-law, who was a successful wood merchant. So, but it's just a remarkable life. Someone like, there's not many people can say that the Prime Minister of the country tried to raise an annuity for him, every year after he retired, and AJ Balfour did that, which is incredible. It just shows you how much he was respected. So yeah, so I call him a man apart because he was. His knowledge was exceptional. He was the best player in the world, but he also designed so many courses, Royal County Down, Ross Penna, back home, the entire front nine of the old course, the first green, the 18th green, he was there when they dug up the dead bodies, underneath the 18th green. Do you know that story?
We're about to hear it.
Okay.
Wait, I'm going to go get a pint.
Yeah. Yeah. So they were. So Old Tom, the green was in the same position, roughly, as it is now, but it was a tiny little green. So what Tom wanted was a large plateau green, a large green. So they started digging up the earth and trying to level it off, etc. And they opened up and discovered lots and lots of bones, and then suddenly realized that this was a pit, a cholera pit, under the 18th green, and they downed tools. And because you got to think, about 120 years previously, they were throwing witches off the cliff to see if they could float, and if they did float, then they were dragged up and burnt as a witch, so they're a superstitious bunch. So they see this cholera pit, think, oh, this is cursed land. And Tom said to them, well, if you don't pick up your tools, you're not going to get paid. And obviously, they needed to get paid. So they got over the superstition and finished the green. And if you're playing the hole, it's the top right-hand corner where it rises up. That is where the cholera pit is, still there today.
Wow, fascinating. Do you shoot for a target number of well-chosen words, or it just comes as it comes? It comes as it comes, really, and I always start off by editing, so I don't write straight away. I edit and then sort of build up, and then, and then eventually get into the flow of things. But it just takes a wee while to warm up. But, when I'm really into a book, into writing, I would get up at 5 a.m. Just because I'm excited to get up, and want to write. A friend of mine said many years ago, he said, if you want to do something, just do it, So in other words, do whatever you can. You can't say, oh, well, I've got too many family commitments. Okay, well, get up earlier, So and he was very brutal, So it takes a while trying to find that space, but yeah, but I will, with this Alan Robertson book, and it's starting to get really good because I'm now talking about the 22 hole layout and where the holes might have been, and using the bunkers as maybe that's maybe where where the hole might have been. So I'm loving that, and the analysis of that. So I could see myself getting up very early just to write that, Influences on you as a young person and as a young writer? Are there people like that?
Doc Malcolm, who wrote Colossus, the Tom Morris book. I never got to meet him. He was dying when I was researching Tom Morris, and I wanted to speak to him. And I spoke to Peter, and Peter said, no, you have to just leave him. He was beyond having any visitors at all, and I was just gutted because I think his writing is brilliant, because he's able to write golf history in an accessible manner, because sometimes books are heavily reference books, and sometimes they're very easy to read. But Doc Malcolm was right in the middle. His references were phenomenal, but his language was just wonderful. And I really wish I had some time with him. And Chick Harper, who also designed Colossus, was a good friend of his. And he talks about how brilliant he was at presenting, Tom Morris and giving a talk about him. When I give a talk, it's like I'm standing in front of a firing line and I'm about to be shot, if I have to do public speaking. Whereas Doc was fantastic, from the David Joy mold, he could be very dramatic and stuff like that.
Roger McStravick, it strikes me that we could tell stories and take areas of the game and areas of your career and talk all night. So I wonder if we could ask or invite you to come back another time, and we'll pick a few more areas of your choice this time to tell some stories. Would that be something that you would have interest in?
Absolutely. I know, it's a pleasure to speak to you. So absolutely. I talk about Tom Morris all night. So bring some cocoa.
Very good. So I'm wondering if there are any other questions out there from the audience. We ought to defer to them.
My question really is to the whole group. Are there others in the group that are going to be in St. Andrews next week? I mean, I'm thinking, hey, we organize a dinner or something.
Yeah. So are you coming to the event on Monday night? It's a Meet the Author event, and there's one on Tuesday night as well. So it's myself, Neil Miller, David Hamilton. It's sort of there's some big hitters from the BGCS at the Arne World Golf Museum.
Gotcha.
Roger, you said something that I think is going to raise the eyebrow of a lot of people. And it was just a brief statement when you said Tom Morris didn't really make clubs. He stamped them, but he didn't make them. And the number of people whose prized possession is a Tom Morris play club or some short spoon, to think that, that wasn't like, he didn't grind away on it all day long. I mean, this is a bombshell comment that you made.
But it is true, he made feather balls, and he was a feathery ball maker,
He made a few hand hammers.
They never met clubs. Philip met clubs because he was a carpenter by trade. He made some of the furniture at Stratarham House was made by Philip, but also the Philip workshop. And sorry if you know this already, but the Philip where Philip met his clubs was the same shop that Tom Morris took over. So the Tom Morris shop, it used to be an old cart shed for Willie Fairfield. And then Philip took it over, and then, went through various hands, but eventually ended the Tom Morris shop.
When I've been to St. Andrews, I've never, like I said, it's always in the open. So I've never seen the Himalayas. Is there anything you have to say? Have you ever done anything with the Himalayas? And was that essentially a ladies putting chipping course, or was it everybody played it?
It was a ladies putting course, because the ladies were using putting holes near the Tom Morris shop. And the problem is that it's also where the caddies were hanging out. So it wasn't, for the gentle ladies to hear all this sort of gruff language. So the idea was that this would be a nice place, a wee bit away, where they could go and putt and not be bothered by caddies. And then what it actually became was the middle classes. It was like a socially acceptable place to meet, for couples to meet under the eye of a guardian. So it became like a courting place for the middle classes.
Putting club is still in existence and going strong, isn't it?
Yeah, still ladies putting clubs, St Andrews ladies putting clubs from 1867. Still wonderful. Anybody can play it. You know, you can just go down. Don't even have to have your putter with you. They'll lend you a putter, and it is great fun. It really is. There's a thing called the championship, and I've never been able to complete this. Is that you start off with the jigger in, and you have a few drams, and you go and play 18, and then you go back to the jigger in and have a few drams, and go back and play 18. And the idea is you're trying to play 72 holes in one day. And I've never completed it. I've never, you know, so that's a challenge, because the walking back to the course gets longer and longer. You know, but great fun day.
So Roger, we have really appreciate all your time, your energy, your expertise, your willingness to get personal with us. It's been wonderful. We have a tradition of wrapping up with thank yous. First of all, thank you to you. Thank you to your family for sharing you with us this evening. The last time we were together, we had the similar position and permission, and we made the most of that. They say you get to know somebody when you play golf with them, and we did that. And they say you get to know somebody when you have a few drinks with them, 2 drams with them, and we did that. And I'm going to add something to that. You get to know somebody really well when you share a Zoom call with them. So, and we did that. So I consider you a close friend, and certainly a close friend of the society. And thank you.
You're very welcome. Very welcome. It was lovely speaking to you all.
Very good. So we're going to bid you adieu and thank you very much. I will invite other members on the call to participate with the Golf Heritage Society. We're recruiting a golf Zoom series manager to reach out to those notables that we would like to have on, and organize the calendar so we can continue to have fun with other great people like Roger McStravick. So give us a call. Let us know if you're interested in that. So
thank you, Roger.
Yes. And also thank you to our production team. Our person who does the advertising is Bob Geddes. He does a wonderful job, often on a moment's notice. We appreciate that very much. And also to George Petro. Dr. George does the Zoom call tonight and made sure that we were whole and it worked out okay. So George, thank you very much. And also to Pete Georgity for being there as the co-host and the man behind the scenes. He's probably out servicing the dogs again, because I understand that there's a monsoon in Ohio. There's always a monsoon in Ohio. So, but Pete, thank you as well. So team, thank you. And I think we should sign off. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Thanks, everybody.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Good night, all.
you.
Thank you.
Bye.